half boy, half god, all Apollo. You're listening to Ranking Rick Riordan, a podcast about Percy Jackson and the whole wide rest of the Riordanverse. I'm Dan.
I'm Olga.
And I'm Clara, and today we're discussing the Trials of Apollo, Book 4, The Tyrant's Tomb. And we do not have a mythical sponsor this week, but It's the holiday season. And I just want to recommend to everyone that they go out and purchase Daughter of the Deep if they hadn't, because I am selfish and really want a sequel.
Mm-hmm. And also, if you can, because apparently It's getting hard to buy.
One of my coworkers went on like Friday after Thanksgiving, and she went to a Barnes & Noble, tried to find it, and they were out of stock.
So maybe I'll be fine and we'll get my sequel anyway. But also, it's just a good
thing
book,
to do.
So it's a good present for yourself.
Get the good book. All right. A little bit of housekeeping. If you haven't noticed, this is audio only. I plan to bring back video for either Tower of Nero or the beginning of Magnus Case, just depending on things. This is just easier for us. And I want to talk about some scheduling things. First off, we're going to have these 2 weeks of Tyrant's Tomb, where I don't know where we're going to break this in half. We'll just see. We're going to be 2 parts of that. And then I'm thinking we break until probably the week of January 3rd, have a few weeks off so that we don't have to feel rushed during the holidays. We'll come back with Tower of Nero, and that will be fun. And just in general, I'm sorry for our podcasts being somewhat intermittent. It's been a very busy year. I'm trying to get back on track after the holidays. We shall see. But with all that said, shall we get into the Tyrant's Tomb?
Yeah.
All right. Olga, what is your thoughts?
I really enjoyed this book. I feel like it still carried forward some of the somberness and seriousness of, oh my God.
Burning Maze.
Thank you, Burning Maze. Everything about that book depressed me, so I'm just like putting it out of mind. But anyway, so Burning Maze carried forward, but this was still like a lighter read, but it didn't feel callous in its lightness, so it felt like a little bit more of a breath, like the way we kind of struggled a little with like the humor, or at least I struggle with the humor in Burning Maze.
Yeah.
I didn't struggle with the funny parts here, and it didn't lessen the serious parts. I have criticisms as well, we always do, but I think that Tyrant's Tomb is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, I agree with Olga. I think the main things that happen here are fantastic. Like, I think the main plot is fantastic. I have some very serious, like, what's the opposite of serious qualms? Because I love Apollo.
Minor qualms?
No, like the total complete, like, I have serious like kudos.
Kudos.
Oh,
Okay.
I love Apollo in this book.
Yeah.
To an extent that, like, he is such a fantastic character.
Peak Apollo.
It's peak Apollo.
Yes.
And so even though I think my quibbles here are with side characters, with side plot stuff, but the main thing is so great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I blazed through this book. If you remember from the last podcast, I had finished it before we even did Burning Maze, which was not my intent. I meant to just start it, and I just couldn't stop. So, I mean, that says something there, because I feel like I read this book faster than I read almost any other book. That being said, now having had a few weeks sitting back and thinking about it, I do feel like the quibbles I have stick out in my brain more than I wish they did. And I do agree with you that it's mainly side character related. It's mainly feeling like certain things didn't fully meet their potential. And it's honestly, in general, it's mainly character related, minus Apollo. But again, as far as the overall story and the tone and the intensity of the fear of these oncoming 3 different baddies coming at them from different angles, and I thought there were some fun little horror-y type moments, and just so many different pieces coming into play that I thought was really cool. I will say, and we don't necessarily have to jump into this really right now, but it leaves us in a very odd place for the next book. It kind of it feels like Nero and Python are an afterthought.
Oh,
yeah.
Really?
I mean, given how it felt, especially because it feels like Burning Maze and this are part 1 and part 2 of a separate thing. And now it's okay, and now we'll go do that thing. And it's like
you know how Rick does that thing in like the climactic moments where it's like the really big climax and then there's the other climax that happens after.
Yeah.
I think it feels like that, but it's like
the
by
whole
book instead of
I could not disagree more.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I see how this is where I do agree is yes, this is climax number 1.
Mhm.
And we're going to have a second one.
I love Rick.
Right. But the thing is that usually I agree that the second one is like underwhelming in comparison.
Yeah.
Whereas this one to me is we're coming full circle as opposed to usually it's like we come full circle here and then there's a like we would be done by now. But the question of how to defeat Python is looming. And I don't know how he's going to do it.
Here's the problem for me, is that unlike Gia or Kronos or Apophis, who they built up as the main villain throughout all 5 or 3 books, I feel like Nero got really derailed and seems like the lamest of the 3. Obviously, Meg stuff aside, he seems the least threatening to me. And Python is just like a snake who's been snarling in dreams.
Yeah.
So like
that's fair.
I'm with you. I really thought Caligula was being built up to be the big bad. But I get what here's I think what the weird thing is. So like Apollo has his personal thing with Commodus.
Yeah.
And Meg has her personal thing with Nero.
Yeah.
To me, it would have made sense for Nero and Commodus to have been this book's.
Yeah.
And then Caligula and Python, right? Because then you have the sort of emotional climax and then the like tactical, or switch it. Like,
one or the other. Yeah.
But it is emotional because Caligula is the one who killed Jason.
Oh, no. I mean, like, for sure. I mean, just like with the personal, like, you know, it's a sort of like, and now, like, we're really going to, but it's a sort of, they faced their past.
Yeah. I just think that, for me, the thing is that the biggest threat, like Python we're just like told is a threat. Yeah. But the biggest threats that we've seen have been Caligula and Commodus. And then we have Tarkin coming out of nowhere, and it's like 2 different armies are attacking them with these fleet of ships, and they're coming. Whereas now we're going to Nero. And I was saying to you a couple of weeks ago, Olga, that this is a very strangely organized pentology because every book, the villains get weaker. Because every book, they take one of the oracles back to the good guy side. So it's not like normally it would be like the villains get this oracle, and then by the 5th book, they're stronger than ever, and they're on the cusp of controlling fate. And how are we possibly going to stop them from controlling fate? And instead it's like, oh, now they're down to just Delphi? And how is that? That doesn't feel like we're ramping things up.
I can see that. I agree that usually it's like we're losing very slowly and now we're going to reclaim all the territory. Yeah. But the thing is that there are so many odds already feeling to be stacked against Apollo, especially, that like I feel like it's at least they have these minor wins to keep them going, because he would not be able to handle all these losses. Yeah. And so this is where the beginning of the series being so bad lets it down, because it's not, I understand. I agree. I don't feel like excited about returning to Nero because Hidden Oracle was like so meh. Yeah. And now I'm kind of gunning for its redemption. I understand that we're told repeatedly that Python is scary, but like we're told by Apollo, like he is intimidated. He's like real and repeatedly Python is looming in the background and I don't know what to do about this.
On the flip side, it's even with Python, the stakes have been lowered because now Apollo has a lot of his godly powers back. So like before, when he was first thinking about Python and how am I possibly going to defeat Python, it was in Hidden Oracle. And that was when he was very human. Yeah. Now he's less human. So it seems like less of a leap. To be clear, like in some ways, the fact that I have these like low expectations, I'm happy about, because hopefully it will surpass them. And I've heard this book is good from a lot of people. So
yeah, I just don't. I prefer this because I think about what you said, Dan, about Apollo. Does he want to be a god, right? Yeah. And he gets to that here. Yeah. Does he even want to be a god? What does that mean? Yeah. Like, and what it will mean for him to become a God again and what it means for him to still be becoming human. That's the really interesting thing in this whole series.
I care mostly about how it actually ends, less about Python and
and so in a way, for me, the fact that Apollo is getting increasingly competent, but Python is staying the same, it's kind of the same and okay for me in a way that like I would be less interested in it if I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's just different.
Yes. It feels different.
Yeah.
I do want to touch back on Apollo gaining his powers back slowly, and that's just like happening without us really understanding why it's happening.
Yeah, weird.
Yeah.
I agree. Dan brought this up as a criticism, and I'm like, I completely agree with you there. And I think that is probably my like harshest criticism of it.
Yeah, and I mean, people will probably be like, well, the prophecy said he'll start to jive, and like Lupa's like, as soon as you go to Tarkin's tomb, you'll start getting it. Like there are like half explanations,
but it's not an explanation. It's a prophecy that it'll happen, which doesn't explain why.
Like, is Zeus giving him? Like, is he earning them back? Is Styx doing something? Like, it's very odd. And I was actually saying, I think it would have been really cool if at the end of Burning Maze, he absorbed Helios's essence. And like Helios like gave that to him, and that's why he was starting to get some powers back. But Helios was so weak that it's not like he's full god now. I thought that would be cool. But again, I don't know where they're going. Maybe there'll be an explanation and we'll get it. But
yeah. Well, I think we've got 2 against 1-ish here.
There's plenty I like. There really is. I mean, I think that I have some issues with Lavinia, but in general, really like the introduction of that character. This is, again, I think every book Meg gets better. I think this is probably her best book. I think that Apollo has a lot of things here that are interesting that I feel like are setting up and foreshadowing the next book, which leaves me a little bit wanting more at the end of this one, but also excited for the next one.
I don't understand what you just said. It doesn't.
He's dying.
Literally choking on that idea because Apollo is perfect in this book. I don't know how else to like.
All right. You know what? This is gonna get messy with what we're recapping versus what I'm just diving into. But I feel like I need to talk about like theme stuff before we get into the actual recap, right? So I feel like you know how like every book I talk about like the theme of this book is this and him learning this thing. I feel like there are like 5 themes in this book, and that they kind of muddle each other. So there's like I have a bunch of themes here, and then like the explanations of them. So there's theme of love, there's a theme of growing a conscience, and then there's like choosing your own fate and getting redemption. And love feels like it might be the main thing because we start with Lavinia sneaking out for a crush. We have Hazel and Frank healing each other's curses. Lester and Meg have like a sibling love that they admit. Lester has a crush on Raina. Raina decides not to worry about love anymore. Hippocrates and Cumi and Sybil want to love each other and die together. But I'm saying, like, what is the lesson that he actually learns here? Or is it just foreshadowing what he learns in the next book?
There's one thing that's left out here.
Yep.
And it's Diana and Apollo.
Yes, you left that off.
Because it wasn't good.
What?
Okay, well, Dan, you can take your dumb opinion. Go somewhere else, and Olga and I will talk about this very good
Sounds
book.
good.
I was incredibly disappointed with Diana.
Okay, well, hold on. Let me and Olga talk here for a second.
Okay, cool.
So the whole thing is that she's still a goddess. So she's not going to act human. And the fact that Rick doesn't just make her immediately a human is powerful here when it's combined with how much she does love him and how that's demonstrated. And so it's a really specific kind of love, and it's a family love. And Apollo also talks about how, he has that, and then he's also now starting to think a little bit of Thalia and Jason as his siblings much more specifically, and how at first he would have been like, that's not my family, but now he would be honored to call them his family. So there's a familial love piece that I think is really crucial for Apollo when we're also thinking about the overarching themes of what is his relationship with his abusive father.
Yes, thank you. And his like distant, disapproving stepmother too.
So I don't disagree with anything you've said. I just think, well, aside from that, I think Diana is very anticlimactic, shows up way too late and barely does anything.
But that's a god. But that's a god, though.
But it wasn't dramatically satisfying to me as a reader. She showed up for like half a second.
I can understand that. So where I will agree is that I wish that we saw her and the hunters and all that like doing more as opposed to being told that they did stuff. Yeah. However, how she disappears and her limited actual interaction speaking with Apollo, I liked.
Yes, because I think it's crucial. Because if Diana is now all of a sudden really emotionally available for a human, that throws the whole God thing out of whack.
That's fair.
Like, they are supposed to be distant. They are supposed to be whatever. And this is another thing of Apollo figuring out what it means to be loved as a god, what it means to love as a god, You know
what I think is throwing me off about that is that we've already seen gods do more than she did here. Like, we've already seen Poseidon with Percy. We've already seen, honestly, Artemis with Apollo in previous books when they were both gods. I feel like she was more warm to him. And
I'm struggling
I'm thinking about In Blood of Olympus specifically.
Yeah, I know. I'm struggling to remember the warmth there. Yeah. It was more like, she's Apollo, what did you do? Yeah. It was more like, that's the thing where for them as Olympians, it was like the cajoling relationship. Apollo as a god would not say he loved his sister.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. He's too arrogant above that. And Artemis is more connected to humans, but even then, the humans she's connected to are also immortals, thanks to her, or at least have that extended lifespan, and that's different than how she relates to him.
I still feel like this is a setup for the next book because because I don't feel like he necessarily learned something and changed in this book from the love angle.
I disagree.
I think he did as far as like the conscience and learning about redemption and putting things in the positive column and all that stuff.
But that's part of the same thing, right? Like, the way that you put things in the positive column is through love.
Yeah.
Shut up, Dan. I'm
boys are deep and profound. They don't like talking about emotion.
I'm just taking a cue from Raina. All right, let's get into this thing.
No, we're getting into it now. Now that he realizes how wrong he is, he wants to move on.
I don't know. The conscience stuff I thought was really good, but it was all contained at the radio tower, and I didn't feel like it was throughout the book.
I don't disagree.
Yeah. And then at the end of the book, we get into like make your own fate. And I'm like, that's interesting. But that feels like it comes out of nowhere kind of too.
Yeah. I don't really know about that.
Yeah. I would say overall, love is the theme of the book.
Yeah, it is. Because the other things are tied to it as well. Yes.
So what do you think he learns?
I'm trying to compare this to Burning Maze.
Yeah.
Right? Because like the difficulty is, I think, these two books are so linked that it's really hard for me to separate them.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot about sacrifice and grief and love.
Yeah.
So in the other books, he's always been really afraid of death.
Yeah.
Even when he's willing to sacrifice himself.
Yeah.
And here he's in so much pain at one point that he thinks to himself, I want to die. And I think this is the arrow of Dodonna at this particular moment is like, don't do it.
Yeah.
But he holds on. And there's something about that and the fact that Frank also there's something about the consequences of sacrifice and the importance of being present, and I
feel like that might be the overarching theme of the pentalogy.
Yeah,
because that totally comes into play in Dark Prophecy too. And
Apollo undergoes individual story arcs to varying degrees. Like within each book, he has like growth.
Yeah,
and there's some semblance of an arc. But I agree that the overarching arc, I think, is it is his growing connection to humanity. Like it's how he experiences guilt and growth, like understanding and like trying to make it up to people for his actions. Like I would say he starts more beating himself up and then it's more about like, what can I do to prevent tragedies? How do I become an active player in my life and other people's lives to make up for things. And he still feels the guilt. He still feels, compassion early and later. It's just the extent of it.
And that's the thing where I feel like that is the most successful thing that he learns is the conscience. I'm so bad at saying this. But I just feel like that, to me, is not as intrinsically tied with the love stuff as it seems to be with you guys. But I will say, because I was about to say, I feel like in Dark Prophecy, he already was clear that he loved his sister and like was feeling that love. I will say we could argue that this is the book where he's like able to say it. He says it to Meg. He's, I
think that's really a big deal.
So maybe, okay. I'm coming around a little bit.
And if we're thinking about actions also speaking louder than words, right? Like the action of saying I love you is a powerful action. I mean, I know it's also words, but he's showing and proving how much he loves the people he loves.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's important. It's an important step.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm going to be contrarian. In Dark Prophecy, he literally shows how much he loves Meg by doing an action of taking the thing from her and absorbing the dark whatever the heck is going on at the end of that book.
100%. 100%. I totally agree that he's been showing how much he loves people. But one thing he's doing here is recognizing the importance of calling it what it is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And there's a difference for a hero, right? Of like, are you just sort of throwing yourself out there and trying to do a cool thing? Or are you doing something out of love and making decisions that also have consequences on the people around you in terms of grief?
Yeah.
It's a vulnerability thing. So as he regains his strength physically, he becomes more emotionally open to people. I think there's, we're in his head through this. He's our narrator, so we can hear his asides and like, oh, that was sweet of her. And, I do care and all of this stuff. Like we know, but it's another, it is a new level to be like, it is important for me to tell you how I feel about you because it's a fear of rejection. It's a fear, like he
which
had
is another theme here with Raina.
Yeah, exactly. He's emotionally unavailable. He was too egotistical to ever admit something as frivolous as emotion, because he was like, I would say Apollo, despite parts of him being like flamboyant, so to speak, like he embodies toxic masculinity in many ways. So this is him moving away from that and being more in tune emotionally. In every book, he's more in tune and more in tune. And that's if we think about like integrating his newfound humanity with his old godly personhood, the idea that Raina says that like Venus would have known that like you're the only person strong enough to like handle rejection is an interesting, like maybe even as a god he had that that might be something that's a part of who he is that makes him that could be an attribute of his that's unique and not just a human or a god thing but an Apollo thing.
Interesting.
All right. So are we swaying you?
I mean, sort of.
Okay. All right. I'll take it.
If you don't, as long as you don't call him Mario on this podcast.
Love that you're making a reference to a thing that nobody's heard.
Hey, if you get Daughter of the Deep, and you let us know that you did, then maybe Dan will put out our spoiler cast of Daughter of the Deep, and then you can listen to that, and then you'll get my really funny joke.
Yes. It's all worth it.
Yeah. When is that coming out now?
I think I might honestly wait until we're done with Apollo.
Okay.
Yeah.
The line gets further.
I'm just pushing. Look, I was going to put it out during our break, but I just want to enjoy my break.
Fair enough.
So.
All right.
I don't want to hear about Mario.
Do we want to talk about Lavinia at all, or do we want to get to her when we get to her?
The first bullet point will set that up quite well. So why don't you read the first bullet point?
Okay. So we're getting into the recap now. Meg and Apollo are driving toward Camp Jupiter with Jason in the trunk. That makes him sound alive. Yep. That was bad of you, Dan.
Dan, you are being unnecessarily cruel in this episode.
They're driving a freaking hearse. Yeah. So anyway, they are attacked by a Uranimos. They are saved by Lavinia, daughter of Terpsichore. Lavinia is a pink-haired, nature-loving Jewish lesbian dancer with severe ADHD and a quirky weapon. Whoa.
I don't know. I just don't get her. I don't understand her at all. And I'm I don't know.
I'm middle on her. So overall I like her. I listed out all those things to be like, did he give her a few too many? And I'm going to say maybe he did. Because for one thing, I think he doesn't in any way engage with the fact that she's Jewish. Mm-hmm. He doesn't engage in the fact that she's a dancer. Almost like we don't see her dance.
She just like soft shoes occasionally.
Yeah. And he doesn't engage with like the fact that she uses this weird weapon. Honestly, is like the thing that bothers me. No,
that's what bothered me too. It was a lot like Meg in the first book, where it's just sort of like she's quirky. Do you get it? She's quirky. She's not helpful because of a thing that's a quirk thing that she does to be like, quirky.
I'm just like, she's not an idiot, and using a weapon like that is idiotic because it's going to get you or people you care about hurt.
It's like so here's the comparison: Hazel and her spatha. Yeah. Like. We know from Son of Neptune that people were like critical of Hazel for using that and that it's not very Roman to use a spatha, like a distance weapon of that kind.
Yeah.
And how like she stood by that and it was a big deal for her to like continue with it and use it. Whereas so, like, there's an argument to be made that, like, Rome has softened on that, and especially with Hazel being her... especially with Hazel being her centurion, I could see that. But the thing is that, like, there's a difference between, like, a sword that takes, like, still skill and effort and, like, planning and, like, practice to wield.
I mean, all of that is true of the other thing, too. But.
Right, but the thing is that, like, almost all the time, though, it doesn't make sense to have this weapon, whereas at least, like, Hazel Spatha makes sense in more context.
Yeah. Well, it'd be one thing if she had this crossbow thing and a dagger.
Right.
You know, like or if they showed her dancing being more useful when she couldn't use the thing. That's, like, I don't want to say, like, totally bash her, though. I think there are definitely things about it that I like. I like her, like, nature side. I like the way they handle her lesbianism. I like her ADHD, and it really highlighted to me how little they've interacted with other characters' ADHD. And the fact that she can't handle rules in the same way, and the fact that she is, very unsettled and needs to get out into spaces more. And I thought all of that was really good, which is why I felt like the end for her felt weird. I don't feel like her becoming a centurion is where I thought that story was going at all. If anything, I felt like it was a story of, you know what? She's a good person. She's a good fighter, whatever, but she doesn't belong here.
Yeah, she should go to Camp Half-Blood.
Exactly. Yeah. I honestly was like, I thought so too. I was like, are they going to say she's Greek? Like what?
Yeah, or just like, hey, you know what? Maybe we should have like exchange students because some people might prefer to be like Clarice would have loved.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, it doesn't like, yes, she's helpful and she did a great thing in the battle, but she's not going to stop breaking rules. And that's what you guys are all about. Even if you gave her this like upgrade, it's not. She's still her. Like,
well, yeah. So this is another thing that in my mind, given another context, I think I would dislike Lavinia a lot. She fits the kind of character that normally I hate and I get annoyed by.
Try to sway me.
No. But that's the thing. Like something about this over mishmash of her, and maybe it's just the way he writes her voice and like the things she says and like just Apollo's interactions in general with Lavinia that are like winning me over in and of itself more than her character. There's a lot going on and maybe not everything, by trying to do too much, like maybe not everything got the time that it needed and was extraneous. Like I definitely think her being Jewish is like, how is this relevant? I guess?
Like and can I just say about that? It is awkward to introduce religion when she's praying to other gods.
So I want to talk about that real quick. It's driving me absolutely cuckoo because I knew she existed before this book because of all the various like research and things I've done for the podcast and stuff. So I knew she existed and I knew she was Jewish. And I read somewhere that Rick addressed the fact that she was Jewish and in a Greek world, in a Roman world, right?
Yeah.
I thought it was in this book. maybe it's in the next book, or maybe he literally just talked about it in an interview, but he definitely addressed it at one point and doesn't think it contradicts itself because in his world, everything's real. So he can be Jewish and the Jewish God can exist while also being the daughter of a Roman god. But that's not in. But I wish that was in the story.
Well, so right? and I mean, I think it gets complicated, and I don't want to say especially for Judaism, but especially for a really monotheistic religion. Yeah. And you can. I'll just get going talking about this, but I mean, there's one thing to be the son or daughter of a God and be like, but I don't pray to that God because I pray to this God, versus having your entire life revolve literally around like living, eating, sacrificing at a temple to these gods. Like we're celebrating Hanukkah right now, where we really specifically celebrate we celebrate killing people who actually do pray to the Greek gods.
Yeah.
Like, it's a bit of a stretch. Yeah. I don't really mind, but it was a sort of like, maybe don't throw this in as part of her identity markers unless you are going to explain it in some way.
I'm approaching it from because I don't have a lot of like actual Jewish, like religious-based education. Mine is very cultural. So her being specifically a Russian Jew, a first-generation Russian Jew, like myself, her dad is I believe like he's a Russian famous dancer. Yep. My interpretation, I could be wrong, was that he like fled the Soviet Union or something, probably. Like given the timeline of this and her age, he would have been like a Jewish refugee.
Where's his book?
Yeah, well, my point is just that like he's very interesting, and everything that we like that story of her familial background rests on Apollo thinks her dad is hot because he's a great ballet dancer and he's famous and all that. That's great. Her dad is disappointed in her in only wanting to tap dance as opposed to do ballet like him and that, but she's like focused on the tap dancing. Okay, you're introducing a lot of like familial stuff for her and cultural stuff that would be relevant. Also, her being a lesbian daughter of like a
they do reference that
that he has trouble accepting her lesbianism.
That because he's Russian.
Yeah,
I mean, I was going to say that he was mentioning like the rabbis having problems with it and stuff.
Sure, I'm just saying that like we're introducing a lot of family and religion dynamics that like if there was more room for them would be interesting, or at the very least would have room to explore, and her maybe like connecting, being like, I really don't care, and like I'm gonna tap dance, like again making her dancing more important to her like fighting style or like
that would
strategizing.
Be really cool, honestly.
And it's really her like embracing all of these identities that are rejected, but there's just like so much going on with her at once that none of it gets in equal. And so much going on with the book.
Yeah, I mean, she's not, the side characters need to be written so gracefully in order to be just like one book characters that I think the only time he does that really well is with Josephine and Emmy, where they're such like brief, fantastic characterizations. And with the demigods, it's a lot of like, I'm not going to get to know you well enough. Yeah. And so you're just sort of, it feels sort of like I can add in representation by doing this.
And that's the thing. I have no problem with Rick trying to do this. And like, I see that, I find that like noble, I guess, or whatever, trying to flesh out his world and all the different people. Yeah, like respectable of trying to do this. Yeah. But it's like, if you're not going to make it matter, why mention it kind of thing? Right. Like, it doesn't, I just feel like if her thing is standing up to authority and like, doing her thing that she knows is right, which she does, because that's how they turn the tides of the naval battle is because of her, like, believing in her plan and doing that. Like, that isn't... It would have been great if we could see more of that. I really, that's another criticism along the vein of like not seeing Diana do the fight. Like I am disappointed that we didn't get to see that happening or hear, like we only heard about it after it was done. And I want to like, if her dancing mattered there, I wish we could have witnessed that. If her, like the closest we came was her confronting Raina and being like, I'm going to go forward with this plan and I'm letting you take credit for letting me do this. And then she gets rewarded by being Centurion, which, like, kind of wouldn't matter to her or wouldn't maybe be a thing that approval she sought.
I feel like she felt like she was an outsider, and then getting that level of approval made her feel accepted. So I can see that thought process going there. But I think to me, at the end of the day, she is an outsider, and that's okay. She doesn't belong with this type of group. Like,
and now she's leading them, but we don't, and that's fine. Like, okay, cool, an outsider is a leader, but I don't see why she would like want to lead them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't either. I think it's really interesting. Like I was excited to have a Jewish character. And I mean, like, you can be culturally Jewish for sure, but it feels just a little weird to throw out a religious identity marker and not explore it.
So I want to say something about that. So I am almost certain that one of the main characters in Magnus' case is Muslim. And so I assume that in that they really go into what that means.
Yeah.
And so that is, I hope that he handles that well. And if he does, it just makes me wish that he had done it here too.
Yeah, there are just too many people, too many side characters in this one.
I feel like he wants Lavinia to be on the level of the 7, and he just doesn't have the book to write her in.
I would I would read a short story with her, but the problem is that it's like too little, too late a little bit with her importance here. Like, yeah. And again, I like this character. I was not bothered by her overall while reading. I was just like, this feels like missed potential.
Yeah. I have less of an issue with her as a person and more of an issue with the story he wrote around her.
Yeah.
I like her ADHD and the way he handles it. I like that she can't handle authority and that she sneaks out all the time and that she's flirting with these poison oak and stuff. I thought all of that was really good.
Yeah.
And in general, can we jump down to the feedback for a second? Because it's going to it's not about Lavinia, but it hits on something I want to talk about.
Sure. And just to note, I also scrolled past your point of her friendship with Meg, Lavinia's friendship with Meg being a positive.
I like that quite a bit.
Yeah, I feel like I've been too harsh on her as a person because as soon as you said that, Dan, I think you're right. Yeah. Because I really liked Lavinia at first, and then everything was just like, what is she doing? What is happening?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So I'm skipping down to feedback. This is from Dawson. Hi, I'm a 15-year-old male from Canada and love all of Rick's books. I think that you guys went too hard on Rick for his characterization of Will and Nico in The Hidden Oracle. As someone who's part of the LGBTQ plus community, it's not hard to see why someone like Rick would struggle with showing Nico grow without major critiques from his fan base if he got it wrong. This is why I was jumping up and down with excitement when the Nico book was announced.
I just wanted to hit on this because obviously Lavinia is also a LGBTQ character. And I 100% don't want people to come away from these things thinking that we have a problem with the LGBTQ.
No.
I don't know. I don't think that he has always handled them well. And so I am critical of that. But I have no issue with the fact that they are LGBTQ.
Right. It's this thing of like, I hope I also didn't come off as making it sound like even with Lavinia and potentially her like familial religious thing that like I want it to also be a story again of like struggle with coming to terms with your identity or coming out. It's just one of those things where this is my knowledge of what this community can be like, and specifically the first generation one of a very like socially repressed country is that would not be an easy thing for her, but making it a story of her being like middle finger up to authority, that would be like very powerful in a different way,
connecting the two
exactly in opposition of like again what we criticize with Nico and his like actual like struggle. So is that still exploring a type of trauma that I can see why he wouldn't want that, but he does mention how her religious leaders don't like that about her anyway. So it's just a very it's a tricky territory. We know Rick is doing his best.
My problem with his handling of Will and Nico was that I think I totally see the point that it was a sort of like there's nothing he could do that wouldn't face criticism of some sort.
Especially after the, I don't want to say fiasco with Cupid.
But which so many people have so many mixed feelings about because, strong feelings that are mixed. I just really wish Nico had been more like Nico and that we had seen them together a little bit, Will and Nico a little bit more in, I don't know. I just felt like we'd got.
I just wanted to talk about this email because I feel like we aren't necessarily being as aware of the fact that how much these LGBTQ characters mean to people. And at the end of the day, they are in kids' books, and that's a huge deal. And while I think that we haven't said anything that is like wrong or like that isn't like okay to say, I do think it's something to be aware of. That's I guess.
Fair.
Yeah, really fair. I it's interesting because like I'm trying to think back to when we were kids. I cannot think of a single book I read that had any sort of a queer character who was a main character like at all. Like Glee was a huge deal for us. Glee. That was high school. That wasn't like a
I was watching like Steven Universe in college, and those having like queer coded, if you want to, you know, because they're not human relationships. So I was like blown away that this was in a like kids show, and I was so happy and like, look at all the progress and all of this, that like it was so uplifting. And I can see how like we're coming off as not feeling that uplifting nature of it in Rick's books. I'm also excited for the Solangelo book. Like I'm really looking forward to reading it. Really happy it's going to be from a member of the LGBTQ plus community as well.
I want to say, you know, House of Hades was the first time that I read a book or watched a piece of media aimed at children that had a gay character in it. That I read that in college, and I read that before Legend of Korra happened, which I was like completely shocked by that they did that in Legend of Korra. And yeah, it was a big deal. So like it was very interesting how I felt reading that the first time I read that in college versus reading it now and how the world has changed.
Yeah.
And because when my only reaction the first time I read it was, holy shit. He did that. He actually did that.
Yeah.
Like they let him.
Yeah. I had the same reaction.
Yeah.
You know.
I have goosebumps all of a sudden because it's like this feeling of like, oh my God, we've come so far. There's a lot of room to go. I'm not discounting that, but nonetheless, like I'm like, we're coming off as very old. We're not that old. But like, I was like, so many of these things happened when I was in college or like late in high school, and it feels like a very different world in queer representation than compared to now. But there's still like, of course, it's worth getting excited every time it happens.
And I think Rick, we really, sometimes we should give Rick more credit than we do in terms of being someone who gave us, I guess maybe like, well, at least me and Dan, that experience actually of having a queer character in children's literature. He was the first one.
Certainly major character. There might have been someone on the side somewhere that I'm forgetting about, but like,
where it was important to an important character.
And it really stood out to me at the time that it was like the badass, cool character that everyone loves. Really, you're not doing it with some flamboyant person that's new or something like that.
It wasn't tokenism. That's what it was. I think it's not. There is a lot of that.
And I think Lavinia, it really like I would read a book about her. I'm left with so many questions about her that it's maybe
Can
it's
we
because
get like a Piper, Nico, and Lavinia together book?
That sounds excellent.
Cool. I mean, here's the can you imagine Leo and Lavinia on one team? Nothing would get accomplished. No, what I was gonna say was basically just like I kind of just wish she got another once over. And one of the things that we haven't mentioned, but like there are specifically, but we have talked about there being a lot of side characters. She has to share screen time, so to speak, and screen time has to be shared between her, Hazel, and Raina.
And Frank.
And I'm putting Frank in a different category because like
Hazel and Raina are hurt by Lavinia.
That's true. That's
Frank
true.
is not. Frank has like a very clear like journey here that is not hampered, whereas Hazel and Raina don't get enough to do and are just like in very limited scenes. Whereas, and so is Lavinia, but Lavinia is a new character.
To me, this book cements that he failed when it comes to Hazel. Like he did a very good job in that first book, but but it just went downhill from there. And I find that incredibly sad. And not to say that she's like terrible in this book or anything. She becomes Praetor. She has, strong feelings and a mature relationship with Frank and blah, blah, blah. And she's very powerful and capable, but she's just there. She is by far the least interesting of the main characters.
Her having like magic doesn't matter in this book.
I forgot.
Shocking. I kept on waiting because of the zombies. I was like, surely now. Didn't happen.
Nope.
I thought she'd have cool underworld powers, or maybe because Apollo hints at how like Diana, the Diana form was more like involved with Hecate, or I was like, it's magic for Hazel.
No.
And it didn't happen.
No, it's like he forgot that she had magic from.
Yeah, I mean, she had less than Helios. She had less than who was the big haired, big eared guy? I forget what his name is now.
Not Fred.
Not
that
Fred.
was a different one.
Something Wawa. No, that's the other. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the Pandai, whose name escapes us at this moment because we read the book about it.
I cared so much about his death. And now...
Yeah, you cared about it a little more than I did, so I understand why I don't remember. But but that's the thing where I'm like, Hazel really gets downgraded again, and Raina gets like sidelined by an injury.
Yeah. You know what a good parallel to Hazel is maybe that like Jamie character in book 2, where it's like they're cool. They do a couple cool things, then they're gone.
Jimmy/Jamie, everybody's favorite.
I was like, who's that?
I was looking at Clara's face and she was just blank. Like, what is Dan talking about? Yes,
Jimmy. Yeah, yes. I remember Jimmy. I've never heard of Jamie in my life.
Oh, it's so funny.
Anyway, he was the guy with the powers who had like you're from Nigeria.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've gone a lot of places. Yeah. I'm going to end part 1 here.
I think that's a great idea.
And we'll just restart the recap. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this interesting podcast. We will return next week. And may the gods be ever in your favor.
Bye. Sorry.
Bye. Yeah, sorry.